The next exercise we go into, you guys are gonna hate, but it's gonna be a lot of fun and it's gonna make a lot of sense. It's maybe the most popular thing that we've created. Trust, quality, customer service. I have them in order right here, but that does not necessarily mean they are in the correct order. So, put them in the correct order. Which are most important? All right, who thinks they know the right answer? Tori, what you got, brother?
Customer service, trust, and quality.
Close.
Okay, terrible answer.
No. Close. Who thinks they got it?
Trust, service, quality.
Trust, service, and then quality. Close.
Wait a minute. These two weren't close.
About customer service.
The answer is it doesn't matter. It's completely irrelevant. It does not matter. But these are the three most used words by salespeople and marketing people. And here is something really interesting about all of them. Well, actually, who can tell me a commonality of something what do all of these have in common?
You can't actually measure.
They're all totally subjective.
Yes!
Yeah, totally subjective.
So let's take that a step further. Oh, man. Oh. All right. They do not exist. These things don't exist. They're completely made up. They do not exist. That means if you're selling quality to somebody, you might as well be selling them vapor. It's an amalgamation of things that are actually important to someone. You're just lazy. So what should we start with? Let's start with trust. Who here doesn't really care if their customers trust them? All right, so how do we earn trust?
There's a book called Trust in the Balance that would say that it's results, integrity, and personal concern.
Cool.
Transparency.
Awesome. All wrong. Now, here's why. They all need to be relative to what you do. Trust is something that you earn over time, right? You can't go and buy trust and there's no magic bullet. And all these things have that in common, right? They aren't real. You can't measure, well, they trust us now. We've gone from a 0 to a 1. So therefore, now we know this is our level of trust. It's a completely subjective thing. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about whether or not your customers trust you. Here's what you need to do. Identify the units that make up, we call them value proposition units. What are the units that make up trust? Someone give me an example of something that they do or an idea that builds a unit of trust. I've thrown out a few little tiny of these conversations.
Communication quickly.
Returning a communication quickly, that could be trust. It could be another one too, but yeah. Right. What else?
Passing your health inspection in the restaurant so the food is safe.
Think about that from a value prop perspective. So for you, I want all of you to use this as an opportunity to write down what is a trust unit. Something that you should say instead of, y'all should trust me. First of all, my favorite thing about trust is when you say you should trust me, what does the brain naturally do?
Distrust.
Right? It's the brainstem going right to risk, fight or flight. So like the idea of never had a or 100% food inspection pass rate for the history of the company, right? That's a good objective value proposition that someone might care about. Make sense?
You talked about earlier. I mean, one of the fundamentals we teach, because brick and mortar service businesses used to be a 4 S's, but stand, smile, and state your name. But just disarming people through like and warmth and reflection on the phone. The things that are intangible that people can perceive. I mean, we wouldn't tell them they're getting that.
Yeah.
But in the sales world, generally, like what your presentation is and how trustworthy are you appearing, we try to boil it down to basic things that anybody can actually practice.
Yeah.
And we don't shake hands anymore, of course.
Yeah.
Post-COVID. But
Oh, so the other S was shake?
yeah.
That's right.
Just Yeah. Stan, Jake, and Juke.
Juke.
But I think people are very good perceptors of trust. Most people are, right, by what you see and what are the mannerisms and what are the twinkles in the eyes and things. Some of that you can teach, some of it you can't.
And something else, right? Remember 400 milliseconds. And the brain makes a lot of assumptions based on past history. And those biases are not always easy and obvious, but they're there. So for instance, let's say that you are slovenly and unkept. What should I expect your product or service experience to be like? You cannot replace that perception. It will take you iteration after iteration after iteration of success in order to change that person's mind. If you could ever do it, and it'll always be there. It's brutal. It's brutally unfair. But you're exactly right in doing that. But think about what else? What else? So like,
Humility, I think, is
all right. So humility is pretty subjective. What do you mean?
perhaps just admitting a mistake to your customer.
Admitting a mistake. So being transparent when it's your fault. Taking responsibility when we do something wrong, right? Or whatever, some type of great objective version of that. What about pricing, right? We talked about transparent pricing. Isn't that building trust intrinsically over time?
Yes.
So think about,
You're talking about divulging what your costs are?
yeah, totally.
No, I'm serious.
I'm totally serious.
Okay.
Yeah. What's wrong with that? I tell our customers what our margins are. Typically their eyes light up, but well, how is that? And I said, well, I've invested about $1 million in our system. That way I don't have to have mathematicians and statisticians, and that's why you get your answers in 45 days instead of 3 months. Oh, okay. No, they don't care. They never go lower your price. They should be, thank you for taking that risk and investing all that money to make sure that the deliverable to us is really great.
Would money back guarantee be a trust?
Yeah, trust unit. Money back guarantee is super subjective, but it is objective to an end user. Money back guarantee. What else?
How about warranty?
Yeah. It's great.
About past performance, so that goes back to the 100%. One of the things we have to do is consistently talk about performance of past projects. So that is what builds confidence in the decision maker.
You can talk to any of my past customers. Here are their names and phone numbers.
I think that there's an element of, I think, I don't know if this would be truthful or not, but there's social proof elements. Sometimes like awards and honors that you received, I think can do that to a degree. Mm-hmm. In our organization, we'll talk about when we have difficult clients or it's front facing about some of those awards. For instance, it's funny how Better Business Bureau has become just a glorified marketing agency. It's kind of like quarterbacks, right? But people still tie that together. So we won a Torch Award a few years ago, which is for ethics, right, in automotive. And sometimes you say that. I think people, if nothing else, disarming. It's not necessarily going to be the reason they buy or not. But
So here's what I'll say about the awards. We objectively measure awards. So if you say win awards around ethics, I have not measured that specific, but we do measure awards and different variances of awards, and they are almost dead last every single time. Why? By the way, I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong. It is an objective differentiator, right?
But there's so much like the A-list stuff. It's all voting.
There's no base to
credibility.
measure it against.
Yeah, exactly.
It could be anything.
Well, we know that, but the general fact of the matter is it's not about them. Therefore, all we're doing is talking about us, and we're not buying us. We're selling us. So if they're not talking about them, we don't care. Awards are a good way for an organization to differentiate themselves and pat themselves on the back. No one cares. Yeah.
It's sort of like the.
Good for internal. Good for internal.
You guys ever, we go through that down in Springs all the time, best of Colorado Springs, best of this. And all it is how can you keep giving out little chits to your customers, would you please go online and vote for us? It's got nothing to do with the quality of your service, of your product. It's all about, can you.
It's turned into PR.
Yeah.
It is really all it is.
YouTube for American lawyers for $159.
I know. You can.
What about, like, I don't know how to quantify this in a word, but it seems when I'll meet a client and we start sharing information about, I guess I would call it our personal lives. And I ask a lot of questions when people like that. Tell me about your kids, tell me about, what's going on. Not so much that, but just getting to know them, developing a relationship with them. First time meeting or whatever. Usually I walk away and that amount of trust, it seems, has increased quite a bit more than when I showed up.
Yeah, so that's emotional personal rapport, which is non-scalable, which is tough. So the goal would be is as an organization to try and objectively create something that has scale. Okay, so there's an agency that we work with where and they're a great agency. They work with smaller businesses, and they have this process that they go through that they lose money on. And they take a client through this whole thing and they give them this huge thing about this is your business, and they have all this, and they put so much time and effort into it, and it's kind of like a marketing business plan type of a thing that they do. It's amazing. And once they get to that point, their close rate's like 80%. It's crazy. And so what they did was they took rapport building and built it to scale, so that it was a process that can be followed. Do they lose money on it? Yeah, but not in the long run, right? I mean, they lose their hourlies initially, but it helps them identify a customer that they should be working with and builds a lot of, wow, like if you did this before or even a client. And also, what's cool about that as well is that first impression, right? So every time we go to it smells a little bit like, oh, maybe it doesn't smell. Right? So imagine I never underestimate that first impression. That first impression, you go and you wow someone, the next time you don't wow them as much, what's in their head? Oh, they weren't on their A game today. What about the next time? Oh, they weren't on their A game today. And then the next time, well, they weren't on their A game today. And then the next time, it's like, well, maybe they're just growing and slipping. I mean, your client will make excuses when you don't meet or exceed the first experience than they have. Alternatively, how many times, if you underperform in that first one, how many times do you have to exceed their expectations before they're convinced that that is your typical level of performance? All right. So if we say quality, what do we mean? You don't mean quality. You mean something else. What makes up quality?
Timeliness.
Yeah, maybe. Quality, timeliness could be. What do you mean?
You say you're going to deliver within 20 minutes and you deliver it in 20 minutes?
I'd say that's a trust unit.
Okay.
So that's a quality unit. Service-oriented business, you could make an argument if you're a service-oriented business. Yeah. What else?
Sustainability,
All right. What do you mean?
lasts,
Hmm?
it lasts.
What do you mean?
It's product or service, it's dependable, you can do it over
Time
and
between
over and over and
failures.
over.
Defect rate. Defect rate's a great quality unit. What else?
Defect rate?
Mm-hmm. If you're a manufacturer, 1 in a million, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 400, what's a reasonable defect rate? That's a quality unit. What else?
Low variability.
Low variability, percent fit, right? Just convert it into a metric. I don't know what that is, but you know what I mean. What thickness of material? Density,
Yeah.
longevity, half-life. Kurt, that was for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know if this applies, but I mean, in our, I mean, like the caliber of diagnostic equipment, the tooling that we use is first rate, and so are the quality of parts we price. We'll talk about not using, the low quality parts, the high quality parts, and what that means, right, for the ties to the warranties.
If you're doing something like that, tie a number to it. Give someone something so it's real. If it's easier to communicate the negative, that's okay. Remember, coming back to objectivity. So let's say that you have a part that you have trouble selling because it's already a tough sell, right? It's 2x, but it lasts 30,000 miles longer than another part, but your margins on it are awesome, so you want to move it. So the argument that you're telling your salespeople to make is, well, tell them it'll last another 30,000 miles. Try a new metric. How long you plan on owning this car? The next 5 years. You're going to replace this thing 3 times. You'll only replace this once. That means it's going to cost you, even though it's twice as expensive now, it's going to cost you 3 times more over time. However that, obviously that math isn't right, but you know what I mean. The caliber tools, so we use the XYZ caliber tool. You don't care about this. Here's the reason why it's important. It's 99.9% effective, which means the probability of this being incorrect does not exist, right? I don't care if you, I don't care if you replace it now or not. Just know that this is this is not us subjectively going, you should replace that. Here's a tool that is not wrong, and it's telling you need to replace it, right? It's not us. If you go, one of the things this is a great technique that we developed for this guy. There's a dude that does really, really high-end flooring, wood flooring in Kansas City, residential. And what we found was his ideal buyer. So it's typically over a $50,000 job. They actually want the dog and pony show. And of course he had no dog. And he was like, "What's the dog and pony show?" And I said, "Well, I don't know anything about your job, but like, what's the most ridiculous thing you could come in and do?" And he's like, "Well, we could do like a saturation test on the wood." And I'm like, "I don't know what that is, but it's awesome. What else?" "We could test the humidity in the air." And I was like, "What else?" And he came up with this list of like 8 things of all like, one of it was a species test. He could tell you what species of wood is on the ground. And he puts it in a report. And so this is what I told him to do. Well, first thing I told him to do is I said, "Look, everybody, your close rate is in the garbage." This is out for big data. "Your close rate is garbage. You need to be charging to do an assessment. And you need to build a value to the assessment." He said, "Nobody charges to do an assessment." I was like, "You are. You charge $500. He says, "I'll charge $250. I said, "Oh, whatever." And so he goes and first of all, the number of appointments went down, close rate tripled, right? So because, hey, you come in, it's going to be $250. If somebody's not willing to spend $250 to do an assessment, it's not going to be a good customer probably, period. So he goes in, does this whole dog and pony show. He's here for 30 minutes. He has this thing that he sticks in the wood, and he like measures something, and he writes it down in a report. And then at the end of it, he takes a check for $250 and he puts a report and he says, "I don't care if you hire us or not, but if the people you don't hire, or if you do hire, don't have this information, they can't do this job." And then he leaves. And he closes almost every single deal. So that could be.
For me, that's a terrible sales pitch.
Why? Well, I wasn't talking to you, Scott. I'm giving you an example. What?
That's a terrible sales pitch.
Okay.
You don't want, I don't care if you do business with me or not. Come on, there's no ownership in there.
Oh, it's crazy. You know what his close rate is? His close rate's over 80%. It was under 30.
It's almost like a Chris Voss labeling type.
But Scott, I think you can say that in a way that may not come across as offensive to you, but show your objectivity. And also demonstrate the distinction between what you just did and what nobody else will probably do.
I hope we get to do this work with you, but if we don't, whoever does it better know all this stuff.
There you go.
That's probably what he says. That's what I told him to say. Well, the point is everybody gets 3 bids. So the other 2 bids come out and they're like, "Where's my report?" There is no report.
Grant, there's something about human nature too, because we say a couple simple words like, "We might not be right for you," and they immediately think we're right.
Trust unit.
It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Trust unit.
No is way more of a powerful word than yes.
We do that. Yes, we do that. Yes, we do that.
We use it, and and we say it's very simple. Like a lot of times somebody will say, "Well, I'm interested in this burning question thing. Let's go through some burning questions." And I'll say, "Look, if you don't have at least 4 good ones, and I'll tell you which ones are good and which ones aren't, you shouldn't do this. It's not going to be worth their time or money." And sometimes that happens. Most of the time, it's because I can tell that they're not going to, their ego's going to really, really get in the way of the data. But it's powerful to say no. People aren't told no. They just aren't. They're told yes. So when you say no, people don't forget it. See how this works? Nobody cares about quality. I'm telling you, when you use that word, you're losing money, y'all. There are things that make up that word. And if you don't identify them, you're just losing money every time you use it. Last one. There's a bajillion of these. We have customer sat stuff that we do, just which people always find fascinating. Most people don't do their own sat stuff very well. And we break it into 4 categories, right? So very satisfied, satisfied, somewhat satisfied, and not satisfied. Now what you didn't hear in there is neutral. Do you know why? It does not exist. It is a physiological impossibility to be emotionally neutral about anything. About anything. So here's the example. So I'm from Kansas City, where we have exceptional barbecue. I've lived there my whole life. I know barbecue very well. And I tell you that Bob's place is amazing. You've never been there. He didn't tell you anything about Bob's. I didn't tell you the name. I just said Bob's place. Don't know the name of it, whatever. Your familiarity and your awareness with that restaurant almost doesn't exist. But the fact that you know those things about me, and I said one small sentence, wildly biases your feelings about that, right? Also, I want to tell you about this really great sensitivity training program. Now, based on what you know of me, I may have completely biased that as well. Maybe like, that sensitivity training program is terrible.
Well, you're not going to be neutral.
Now you don't know, yeah, that's right. You don't know anything about those things, right? But we are wildly biased by, like, where you are in the city. By the way, the number one most memorable thing about a billboard is where it's located, not the brand that it's on, the phone number, the name of the organization, or what it says. Now, where you are in a city when you're driving by and you see a billboard can bias your opinion of something. Can't help it. It happens. So there's no such thing as neutrality. Anytime you see anything that says, well, these are the people that said it didn't, they were neutral, throw it away, because whoever is doing it did not know what they were doing. It is a physiological impossibility. And what your score should look like, you're very for a high-performing organization, B2B, B2C, a little bit of variances in hospitality, but for the most part, 60% very satisfied, 30% satisfied, 8% somewhat satisfied, and 2% not satisfied. And do you know what those 2% of not satisfied people have in common?
They tell people.
They might. Well, you know what? I'm not going to say no. They might. They might. But I'm going to qualify that with no one will listen because it's not you, it's them. Not satisfied people rarely ever exist. There's a reason we only have 1 negative and 3 positives. Because 98% of experiences that exist in a spectrum of doing business with you are going to be positive. If you have more than 2%, something is weirdly wrong. It's not you, it's them. Everybody in your organization already knows who those people are. Like, I could tell you why, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that. That guy was crazy. It's not dissatisfied with you, it's dissatisfied with his life. It's about 2% of the population. That's my estimation.
What were the other percentages again?
60, 30, 8, 2. That should be your SAT score. If you use those breaks. If you don't use those breaks, I don't know what to tell you. What are the things you could do to wildly blow someone away? Here's what's cool. Customer service is my all-time favorite. And here's the reason why. There is almost anything that you can do to blow someone away. All you have to do is exceed their expectations by this much. That's it. It's one of the reasons I was getting after these two, because when I showed up, like, oh, this better be good. They've been upselling you for the last, however long. I'm like, great. Right? But if they're like, Grant will come in, he's weird, and I barely exceed your expectations, it'll blow you away. Okay, so let's think about amazing. Okay, so one brand I think sets the bar for amazing customer experience, and it's the Ritz-Carlton. And if you haven't read anything about the Ritz-Carlton, read about what they do. It's amazing. You have, hey, pleasure. They document your room. So they will actually, when you leave, they will, when you leave and they come in and they clean, the first thing they do is they draw the location of everything in your room. And they will put it back. And the reason they do that is because they make the assumption that that's the way you want it. And if you leave again and come back, they will put your room back to order the way you initially left it. Because that's the assumption. Any employee at a Ritz-Carlton, regardless, it could be a cook or a door person or a maid, can spend a certain amount of money, I can't remember exactly what it was, call it $200 without getting managerial approval in order to improve the stay of any guest. Now that is how you empower people to be amazing at their job. Creating exceptional customer experiences or customer service is not really all that hard. Just maybe a good exercise is to jot down what is the expectation of a customer, and then what can I do to actually exceed that. We were talking about this. We were talking about, you ever heard of Culture Index, or some variant, or Predictive Index, or DISC, or any of those things? Is it not reasonable to put a potential customer, a potential client through a assessment like that so that you can understand their risk tolerances? And that'd be just a simple assessment that you do. Wouldn't that exceed their expectations? And you tell them and say, hey, look, I'm not going to work with you unless you do this. Why? Because it's that important to me that I understand who you are as a person. Because money is money, but it's your money. And if I don't understand you, I can't do a great job of managing your money. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go through this assessment. It's going to tell me this. It's going to tell me this. It's going to tell me this. That's just barely exceeding the expectation of you showing up and not doing it, right? But it's a tool. It's metric. It's scalable. Doing these things aren't that challenging. This is the easiest one, I think. No question, this is the easiest one. Summation. These are the building blocks of emotional data. Understanding what your burning questions are. If you don't have burning questions, you are not doing your job as a leader. This is a great exercise to go through regardless. We do this for nothing, for people, just for funsies sometimes. Just like, this is what I want to know. All right, well, how do you put that into a good question form? Because there are such things as bad questions. Let's come up with some factorial ideas. If we're not testing factorial ideas, we are wasting each other's time. Because if we want to innovate and we want to find out what's important to people, the status quo is not good enough. We can test competitors' value propositions. We can test crazy ideas. But if you aren't willing to put your ideas out there and test them, don't expect anything great to happen. Add on some value proposition units, which is saying, all right, well, you said quality, what does that mean? You said customer service, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does waste mean? How do you break down waste into units? What does technology mean? It means something, I promise. It's a lot of times it just takes a little bit of time to talk through it and break it down with the team until the right ideas come out. And once they do, it's kind of like a ball rolling downhill. And especially when you have a team involved, getting everybody to come up with great ideas. And that's what we call the building blocks of emotional data. So that is how you answer burning questions with mathematical precision.